chapter is about bringing human rights and development together. And that has happened for quite some time now. I would say basically over the last 20 years. The point of development and human rights is that human rights is bringing some normativity into the development discourse. This normative element is the international human rights system, the international human rights law, both soft law and hard law, but also the discourse on human rights, because human rights is more than law. It goes beyond law. Human rights and development also gives us the scope for rethinking development, what development is about. For a long time, as we know, in the mainstream development discourse, economic growth and economic development, increasing resource accessibility has been very important and still is very important, certainly. But human rights is bringing in some sort of other values and other norms and other goals for development. It is not just about economic change. It is also about building new types of societies. So it talks about what we want to achieve with development and how we should go about to do that. And the latter is certainly very important because it brings us the attention to how development processes are being designed and implemented. A key element in that certainly is that people should be engaged. Development is not just for people, it is by people. And people should be part of that development themselves. So it is important that human rights-based approach, in a sense, brings more than a legal dimension. It also brings our attention to what we might call the civic space. To give people the right to organize, give the people the right to have a voice in the public sphere, and to be part of public reasoning about development issues. So that is, in a way, why human rights now is not just a southern issue, it is a global issue. It's an issue for every society in the world, because any country has development issues, any country has poverty issues. Do human rights-based approaches work? Well, there's a big debate about that. And I think that the overall conclusion is that over the years, gradually, they have become more important in development projects, programs, and for institutions. So there is a growing alertness about that in many societies, but this is about ebbs and flows in development. So there are ups and downs. I think we can talk about the origin of the human rights approach in two senses. One is the more formal legal sense, which actually goes back to the United Nations Charter of 1945, where there is talk about both development and human rights and security as the main goals of the United Nations, where there is also some attempt to link it, but not very clear. And it wasn't developed further now in conceptual, either in or in more practical terms. I would say that the shifting point was the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War made human rights more accessible for the public debate and for people and actors in development. And after the Cold War, development organizations also started to see the usefulness of human rights in their work. And gradually also by the work of certain important influential institutions, like for instance, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, started to develop more conceptual basis for linking development and human rights, and develop so-called human rights approaches to development to apply human rights in more practical development. So this is a pretty new way of looking at development, and we shouldn't be surprised that it hasn't solved all problems, that all problems with it aren't solved yet. It is an ongoing process, ongoing work in a sense. The rights-based approach, in a sense, helped to refocus what development is about and to put the human being and groups of human beings into the center. It was not about economic development and not economic growth. It was economic growth for human development. And that is why you had to bring in some other standards, some other standards for what we wanted with this development, and conceptualize that both in a human development framework, the importance of education, of social welfare, right to food or food for that matter. But what human rights brought in was a kind of rights anchoring of this development. And why was that important? Well, in the 1990s, increasingly many states had adopted the international covenants on civil and political rights and economic and social rights. And these covenants, as part of international law, gave states commitment to comply with these covenants and these rights and implement them. So you simply had to say, please take your commitment seriously. And that could be used in the development discourse as a normative legal argument for the orientation, direction, design, and implementation of development projects. And I think that that was an important added element into it. So thank you very much.